How old are you?
What kind of man smiles at his daughter while planning to pull the trigger? What kind of love turns into a death sentence right inside your own home? She was a young mother with her whole life ahead of her. Her 6-year-old daughter had just sung happy birthday to Daddy. Hours later, that same Daddy would leave her bleeding on the floor alongside her mother. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was premeditated, personal, brutal, and worst of all, this was family. Tonight on Crime Lab Report, we take you inside the chilling case of 30-year-old Nykeria Jude, gunned down in what should have been the safety of her own home in Robinsonville, Mississippi. But why would Markello Braxton, a man she once loved, turn on her so violently? What pushed him to shoot his own daughter? And could this tragedy have been prevented? This is not just another story. This is a warning, a tragedy, a reality to many families hide behind closed doors. Let's get into it. On the evening of July 11, 2025, the quiet calm of Robinsonville, Mississippi, was shattered forever. At a modest home on Soleil Drive, a single gunshot ignited a chain of events that would leave one woman dead, 2 children injured, and a community forever changed. Her name was Nykeria Jude, a 30-year-old mother whose life was cut short that night.
County Sheriff's Office say one woman is dead after a shooting and a man and 6-year-old were injured. It happened around 7 o'clock last night in Robinsonville, Mississippi at a home on Soleil Drive near Old Highway 61 North. Deputies say 30-year-old Nykeria Jude was pronounced dead on the scene. Deputies identified Markello Braxton as the suspect. He's considered armed and dangerous. Anyone with information should call the Tunica County Sheriff's Office or Crime Stoppers.
She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a mother, and a partner with dreams, hopes, and fears that were perhaps unseen by those around her. Behind closed doors, Nykeria had met Markello Braxton, a man from the same small town. Their relationship began like many others, a shared laugh, a tender moment, but what followed was anything but ordinary. Over time, that early affection turned dark. Domestic disputes became more frequent, tensions escalated, and whispers of a household fraught with conflict found their way to local authorities. From 2015 through early 2025, emergency calls to this very home were made, reports describing domestic disturbances involving Nykeria and Markello. Each call signaled a heartbreak. Each unresolved incident hinted at pain simmering beneath the surface. The people who knew them, best friends, neighbors, say Nykeria tried. She held the family together, but for reasons only truly known to them, the friction never eased. Beneath the smiles at family gatherings and the ordinary life of a mother with her children, a storm had been brewing. Then came July 11th, at around 7:06 p.m. The Tunica County Sheriff's Office received the call gunshots fired at 1060 Soleil Drive. When deputies arrived, they found Nykeria lying lifeless. Her wounds were fatal. A chilling silence fell over the room. Also hit, a 24-year-old man, her son, later identified as Marquavius Young, and her precious 6-year-old daughter, Marlasia. The young girl would later be escorted from her hospital bed, under flashing lights, now symbols of hope rather than tragedy. By the time authorities pieced together the fragments, one terrifying truth stood out. The suspect wasn't a stranger. It was Markello Braxton, the same man Nykeria had once loved. On the night of violence, he vanished, leaving behind a legacy of fear. Over the years, small cracks began to appear in Nykeria and Markello's relationship. She first met him in Robinsonville, Mississippi, a chance encounter that blossomed into love, and eventually, into a shared family. But beneath the surface of shared laughter and fleeting moments of tenderness, a darker reality took root. By 2015, authorities had been called to their home on Soleil Drive multiple times for domestic disturbances, a pattern of tension, arguments, and emotional trauma that remained largely unresolved. Each call was a plea for help, each unresolved incident a thread unraveling the fabric of their family. In March 2025, just 4 months before tragedy struck, another call was made. It was the most recent official warning sign before the collapse. But that night, on July 11th, something sharp and irreversible ignited. At 7:06 p.m., the quiet routine of Soleil Drive was pierced by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Moments later, deputies arrived to discover an unthinkable scene. Nykeria Jude, aged 30, shot in the chest, lying lifeless in her own living room. A 6-year-old daughter, critically injured, rushed to Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. A 24-year-old man, believed to be Markello and Nykeria's son, also shot and critically wounded. The homeowner turned out to be not just a victim, but the center of a horrifying domestic event. Investigators quickly identified the shooter. It wasn't a stranger, it was Markello Braxton, a man whose volatile past was known to authorities. Yet, the brutality of what he did that night surpassed even the darkest rumors. So why that evening? Why did Markello become the instrument of destruction in his own home? While the precise trigger remains unknown, the clues point toward a cumulative breakdown. When someone carries a history of domestic violence and it continues unaddressed, each unresolved dispute adds fuel to a hidden blaze. That night, whatever argument or emotional collapse occurred, it detonated. That same evening, after the shots, Markello vanished. As law enforcement combed the area and searched every possibility, the community held its breath, horror and hope coexisting in a fragile balance. Then, on July 14th, 3 days later, a grim confirmation: Markello's body was found in a wooded area just behind Soleil Drive. No signs of struggle, no indication of escape. Autopsy results would later suggest death by self-inflicted gunshot. The single gun operated twice that night, once against his family, second against himself. In the wake of this horror, a single question echoed through Robinsonville: why didn't anyone stop it? 4 years. Flashes of violence had flickered behind closed doors, warnings unheeded, calls unanswered. Yet what happened on July 11th wasn't just another domestic dispute, it was an explosion. In local forums, grief and frustration mingled. She and Braxton were in an on and off relationship. It's a harsh reminder of domestic violence victims suffering until the most tragic event happens: death. Neighbors spoke of a 6-year-old left clinging to life, rushed to Le Bonheur Children's Hospital alongside a 24-year-old son, while Nykeria lay stabbed of her future, breathing her last in the home, and once hoped would be safe. To help cover medical bills and Nykeria's funeral, friends and community members opened a GoFund, asking for compassion in token form. Reports confirmed a GoFund has been set up to help with the 6-year-old's medical expenses and Nykeria Jude's funeral. That thread on Lipstick Alley, usually a place for gossip, took on real sorrow. Maybe the oldest can take the little one in. These words aren't just comments, they're signs of hope woven from tragedy. But all that pooled empathy doesn't rewind the moment before the gunfire, doesn't explain the why. For that, we must grasp the pattern. History of violence. Law enforcement had been called to Soleil Drive nearly a dozen times over the past decade. Escalation. March 2025 marked the last official crisis, just months before the blood. Domestic violence, when unaddressed, rarely skips escalation. Each unresolved fight, each silent plea, builds a pyramid of tension. On such a pyramid, tragedy only needs a spark. What sparked the fire on July 11th? Investigators never released an exact motive. But in fragile relationships like this, the final straw might be whispered in the worst moments: anger, betrayal, panic. The gunshot didn't just follow violence, it followed years of being consumed by it. By all accounts, Nykeria wasn't a helpless victim. She attempted to break the cycle. But her efforts may have triggered the final collapse. A public statement emerged from the Tunica County Sheriff's Office, framing the crime as a tragic result of domestic violence. Yet it was more than words. The Sheriff's Department honored the survivors, even organizing a police escort to return Nykeria's 6-year-old daughter from Le Bonheur Children's Hospital Turn 0, search 0. The escort flashing blue lights and officer-lined streets served as a beacon. That tragedy does not have to define the end. Healing can begin, even amidst ruins. But the wounds are deep. Nykeria Jude, 30, was full of life and possibility. Her death robbed her daughter of a mother, her son of a guide, and her community of a light. Malaysia, at just 6 years old, faces physical healing and the emotional scars that must now be tended. Markello, aged 24, now carries the burden of survival, the memories of a day that erased normalcy. Why does violence reach into homes the place is meant to protect? Why are calls for help sometimes answered too late? The answer lies in a toxic pattern: escalating domestic violence, hidden conflicts, and faded opportunities to intervene. When early warnings like the multiple domestic calls from 2015 to March 2025 go unresolved, the stage is set for the unthinkable. Tonight, I leave you with a truth as chilling as it is urgent. Domestic violence isn't private, it's deadly. If you hear raised voices, if you sense fear behind closed doors, if someone you care about seems trapped, you can be the intervention. In Robinsonville, Mississippi, on July 11, 2025, that intervention came too late for Nykeria. But you can help stop the next tragedy. To the memory of Nykeria Jude, may your story spark change. To Malaysia and Markello, may your wounds heal. And may the world hold you gently. And to all watching, share this story. Speak up, be the beacon. Because in the silence of fear, nothing changes, but in the voice of love, everything does. Our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Nykeria.